So that is a difference as well between the new label and the old label. There are two things, I guess, to note is one, we've been using drift reduction agents. Now they're also requiring a volatility reduction agent, or VRA, must be in every application as well to help make sure that product doesn't volatilize as much. And the other one is, and I think this is in other herbicides as well, but EPA requires some conservation practices to be in place.
Well, welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. We've got a bonus episode for you today. It's this one's kind of a hot off the press. We all know that Dicamba's back, sort of, kind of, depending on who you ask. It's either a relief or a headache or just something farmers are still not sure whether or not they can trust. And what are some of those things that you should be thinking about as you head into the spring? So joining me remotely on the phone right now, we've got Will Cornelius, Soybean Lead for Cornelius Seed, and he is pulled over in his truck right now making this phone call happen. So thank you, Will. How you doing?
Doing good. It's a beautiful day in central Iowa, going to visit some customers and talk about soybeans and their operations. So excited to get this soybean related topic out there. I know it's always, how long do you wait to get the most information out? Because there's still information that we don't have yet, but I think it's important to get what we do know out to customers, and we can always follow up with details later. So yeah, excited to get into it.
No, 100%. You're totally right. So I think late Friday at that, I think as most folks the businesses were closed, you went through and kind of whipped up a quick video. You had an instant notification for the EPA press release that gave some high level summary. And like you said, it's still pretty high level, but we want to pass along the nuts and bolts of what we do know up to this point. So I guess let's just, kind of start at the top real quick. So what actually did happen? How's it changing? But, what did the EPA decide, and how is it different from the last few seasons and what we do know?
Yeah, it was a pretty wild week for soybeans last week between the market rally that happened early in the week. And then, we had talked just on the last podcast about the doubting how soon we were going to hear if this label got approved. And all of a sudden, end of day Friday, it's like, holy cow, we got this thing. And, worst time on a Friday afternoon. So, not a whole lot got done for the next couple of days over the weekend on updates. But yeah, so after a couple season hiatus here, we've got Dicamba back as over the top use in Dicamba tolerant soybeans, which of course is your Extend and your Extend Flex, which in our view is another tool in the farmer's toolbox to be able to control hard to resist weeds. Back to your point early on. Yeah, not everybody's a fan of Dicamba. I think that's part of the reason that this took so long, because I think my read on the new labels, there was a lot of compromises made from both sides of the aisle, which it's nice to see government work in that perspective, that, we're listening to each side and making the best, middle ground decision we can. So that's certainly a refreshing thing. And there are certainly some changes to the Dicamba label we had before, but it still allows us to use this tool in season. And that's the difference. We could always use Dicamba as a burn down, but now we can use it in season over the top. There's no calendar date restriction like there was before, at least at the federal level. My understanding is that Minnesota did approve their state level, and there may be a date in there. I don't know the details on that yet, but we're still waiting on state level approvals for Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois. So the states do have the ability to add some additional restrictions beyond the federal label, but it'll be TBD on what those are. And once we know, we'll certainly get it out, and as will Bayer and other companies.
Excellent. So, well, no, thank you for that. And just as the over the top thing being key, and you mentioned soybeans earlier, but just because we don't hit the cotton front, but it's also for the cotton folks that care about it. So this new label, what does it really mean, right? Like what's truly changed that's different from before? Because we've been able to do over the top before, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong. And everybody was hung up on the calendar date, which meant you were probably pushing a lot of things you didn't need to push for that magical date on the calendar. That probably led to other issues.
To me, the calendar date, I get it. It's a little easier to police, but it didn't really make sense, because we all know that each year and each day, week, hour is different, and what the reality is what causes volatilization or off-target movement is not only the application and the wind, but also the temperature, and that really doesn't matter if it's, June 1st, June 15th, July 1st. If it's 95 degrees, you're going to be at higher risk. And that's why I think they've gone to this more temperature based model versus a calendar date. I brought up the 95 degrees. That is a cutoff point that is different than what we had before. If the day forecast is to be 95 degrees, you can't spray that day. If it's between 85 and 95, you can only treat half of your acres. And I think there's some question of exactly what that means. Is it, if you've got 100 acres of soybeans, can you go treat 50 of them and it doesn't matter where, or can you only do half the field? I think that's a question that has to be answered yet. Hopefully it's a practical answer. The other big change is there is a reduction in the amount of active ingredient you can apply per acre. It used to be up to 2 pounds. Now it's down to just a pound. So they're reducing the amount that you can spray in a season, and you can do that in up to 2 applications of a half a pound per acre each time. So that is a difference as well between the new label and the old label. The other thing I think the other 2 things I guess to note is one, we've been using drift reduction agents. Now they're also requiring a volatility reduction agent, or VRA, must be in every application as well to help make sure that product doesn't volatilize as much. And the other one is, and I think this is in other herbicides as well, but EPA requires some conservation practices to be in place to be within compliance. If you're in a normal situation, you need up to 3 points to mitigate runoff or erosion, and those can be buffer strips, grassed waterways, contour farming. I mean, a lot of things guys are doing already, so I don't think it's going to be too hard to check those boxes, so to speak. If you are in an area that has some additional restrictions for, pesticide use limitation areas where there's maybe some, what's the word I'm looking for?
Endangered species.
Then they're talking as high as 6 points. So it's still not clear exactly what all your options are, how many options you can get to 6 points, and that information will be coming. The other thing I learned about the temperature based, and I think this is accurate, is it'll be based on your most local NOAA site. As far as, we've got 1,000 weather apps and they all say different forecasts. But my understanding is there's language in the label that'll pinpoint down to which one is the official temperature forecast you use for that determination if you can spray that day or not.
There's a ton there. I know we can turn this into just an hour talking about each section, right, on that. And one of the things you said that I think is pretty good we hit on again was the biggest changes there, right? Those biggest changes is cutting down that application rate. So 2 applications at half a pound. The voluntary reduction agent, that not 40 ounces an acre. The mandatory conservation practices, and it's used as a point system. You talked about 3 points versus 6 points based on what you're around, things like the endangered species. And then, I think the biggest one, temperature-based limits, right? And so you had no application above 95 degrees. With that being said, you also talked about those 6 points. And I think what we'll do, because we're covering it quickly to get info out there, we'll also link an article to a blog post on our website. Our team did an awesome job kind of cleaning it up to make it simple words and almost in a checklist kind of way. What we really hit on, what are the big changes, right? But I think it's just as important to say what didn't change, what stays the same, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, one thing that did change but didn't change is the name of the herbicide. You don't have XtendiMax as an option anymore. They did rename that to Steerax, I think is how you pronounce that, and I could be wrong because I haven't heard it used verbally yet, just reading it off the paper. My understanding is it's a new name, but the functionality, the formulation is all the same as what we had with XtendiMax. The reason they changed the name is so there's no confusion on what the new label, which herbicides go with the new label, and that nobody's referring back to the old label and saying, well, yeah, XtendiMax, these are the requirements. Well, that's the 2020 version. We're talking 2026 version now. So the same, but different name is all. Other than that, I mean, a lot of the things are still the same. Obviously, you still need to wear your PPI, and the restriction reentry intervals are the same. Still need to use drift reduction agents. The 240-foot downwind buffer hasn't changed. If the wind's blowing towards a sensitive area, you got to leave that buffer and come back and spray that area when the wind's going a different direction. Still got the rules about temperature inversions and rainfall, and how many hours and the amount of wind speed, that allows you to spray using the right droplet size, which you can tank mix to hasn't changed. So, the main basic thing, or a lot of them are common sense, really didn't change. It's really those few things we hit at the beginning are the ones to pay attention to. And we'll get some clarification on the EPA conservation options as those come out. And I know part of the reason we haven't seen more from Bayer is just because they are waiting for those state labels to get announced, or at least the key states, before they do start putting out materials. Because the worst would be is if they put out materials and then all of a sudden Iowa or Illinois or Wisconsin says, well, yes, but this also. I think they want to have that covered. And I think most of those key growing states are going to have that done here real shortly. So if there's anything major there, we'll certainly bring it up again in a blog or a podcast or some sort of communication to the customers as well.
Absolutely. And as we talk about, you said this early on, or maybe it's the last on your video update that you put out. It's all a blur because it's all so fast, and we've been wanting to put it out to folks as fast as possible. This is just for the next 2 years, right? I mean, this isn't, and they're kind of like wait and see. Let's kind of baby step this.
Yeah, and that is something I missed, and that's not different either. I mean, we had a limited label the first time, and unfortunately we do again. I think that's another compromise thing, because there's a lot of people that really don't want dicamba out there. Not just what you'd think of the people that are against everything. There's also people in agriculture that aren't a big fan of it either. So you kind of have both sides talking there. So unfortunately, yeah, so we got 26, 27, then it'll go under review again. Hopefully, the way we have it now will work well, and guys will respect the label, and we won't have near the issues, and maybe they'll just reapprove it right away. Because obviously that timeline, that's when Viconic's coming out, which stacks 2,4-D and dicamba together. And it'd sure be nice to, again, keep those tools in your toolbox to use dicamba in season, and whether, you can go either way then, which will be great. So yeah, it's pro con, it gives them the ability to edit it down the road, but it also means there has to be another review, which we all know can take time, as this last one did.
No, it sure did. And you've mentioned a couple of times, issues out there that led us down the path. This might just be for my own knowledge here, but when I think of issues, it's just like, the only big story I heard, at least in the footprint, was drifting, hitting peach trees down in Missouri, killing out that crop. Is it just as simple as, just drift and affecting our neighbor?
Well, the funny thing about that whole situation is it's not like dicamba isn't being used in other crops. Dicamba is being used in corn all the time. I mean, it's not necessarily dicamba from soybeans that's the problem. I'm not trying to throw mud or blame anybody, but I think we all know that dicamba is still a great tool being out there used across the industry. And honestly, the products we're using for soybeans are even better for less volatility and drifting. So yeah, you're gonna still hear some horror stories probably, but I think it's always the silent majority. That's the reality. Is this is a tool that farmers need to help control hard to kill weeds, whether it's water, hemp, palmer, whatever it is. Our toolbox is getting limited, and until we get a new mode of action here in a few years, we got what we got. So, and we've got great genetics in XtendFlex beans. I think Viconic's going to have some great beans. So it sure be nice to maximize the ability to kill weeds with those products by having a dicamba label that continues to be used. So I would encourage everyone, please follow the label as much as you can. It needs to be, it's a label for a reason. The label's the law. And you need to make sure you're documenting your conservation practices, so we continue to use this tool and we don't have to go back to the drawing board here in 2 years.
Yeah, you got that right. And those last two updates from the EPA, they definitely didn't mince words. They were pretty blunt about enforcement, and I think that's a whole other topic of the difficulty that'll bring on. But, you know, they were just saying, hey, these are restrictions that are enforceable and legal requirements. And then, you know, you've got the prosecution under the FIFRA with FIFRA. But at any rate, we've hit that pretty good. And I think just kind of bring it back to practicality is, you know, to summarize again, is what would you say growers should do now before the season starts? You know, are you talking, or folks that were on the fence on the platform based on what they were hearing, should they wait to hear from their state? I guess, you know, any recommendations or thoughts you have on what growers should do before the start of the season?
You know, I think most guys have their crop plans figured out. Their chemistry's been ordered, you know, so I don't think we're going to see a lot of changing between now and spring, you know, and from a logistics standpoint on our company side of things, I think we're nimble enough. If you really say, hey, I have Enlist ordered, I want to go extend flux now that I have the ability, we can figure that out. Let's talk to our salesmen, make sure, you know, especially if they're treated, let's try and figure out a way to work through that. Usually we can find a home for treated beans, but at this point we do have most of the beans treated to go out the door. You know, so I wouldn't run away from your current plan if you already got it in place and it's been working for you. You know, if you were truly on the fence, so let's have a conversation about it. And we still got a great supply of extend flex beans to supply for you. So, you know, the cool thing is it'd been great to have it 2 months ago, but it's, you know, there's no better time than the present to put that tool back in our toolbox.
Absolutely. I think just kind of just commentary for what it's worth is, you know, a lot of this can look as can come across as a punishment, really, but you know, really these are just guardrails, right? They're balancing out the guardrails between a lot of different folks that provided opinions, and I think the biggest thing that we want to make sure we get clarity on, that I know we will, is that conservation requirement. I mean, you were clear. You were like, hey, each treated field, growers must earn, you know, 3 runoff or erosion mitigation points that'll come from the EPA's list of certified conservation practices menu. But even as I was getting ready for this, I was struggling to find what is that menu look like, right? And so I know this is evolving and shifting real fast. But then there was, like you said, higher safeguard for areas where 6 points are required. And really that big goal there was the endangered and threatened species.
You know, as we get another week or two down the road, you know, well before growing season, that will all be clearly spelled out. I know they're working on a website just like they had before for XtendiMax. They're going to have one for the new herbicide too that will answer all these commonly answered questions, you know, and they'll have the map for those restricted areas that have endangered species in them that we got to work around. That I don't think has changed since before. So if you knew you were in it before, you're still in it.
Yep.
As far as I know, there's been no changes to the endangered species list or areas. So I think your point about guardrails is right. You know, the reason we have these additional restrictions is because there has been some concern and there has been some misuse. So let's do our best to follow the letter of the label. So that way the restrictions don't get used, or they pull this tool back out and throw it off to the side and say, no, you can't use it anymore. Because at the end of the day, having it, even with restrictions we have, is better than not having it at all, in my opinion. So, you know, again, let's be happy we got it. We got it before the growing season, and let's plant the heck out of some Cornelius beans and have a great 2026.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I appreciate that. And just as folks as we wrap this up, right, as you're making decisions for 2026, that, you know, that the to-do list is simple, right? It's first, know your label requirements, just cold. Second, plan your conservation points field by field before you need to spray. And third is watch the temperature rules and the weather restrictions closely. And really fourth, keep records, right? EPA is very clear that these aren't just suggestions. So, Will, I really appreciate you joining us. I know you're on the road and helping us translate a lot of this into some real world terms. And to our listeners, if you guys want more conversations like this, please follow the show so you don't miss the next one. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you the next time.